What's going on, y'all? KM Best here. I put Malekith into one of the best decks in the game, and honestly, he might have made it better. This is a deck that I had a 75% win rate with in High Infinite. It's already good, and he was honestly pretty damn solid in the list. So let's go over the list and then talk about some other things you might be wanting to do with everyone's favorite Dark Elf. This is the list, and you are probably familiar with it at this point. This is the Quicksilver build of Wiccan, and what Malekith is doing here is A, helping to thin your deck, so in the games where you aren't Wiccaning, you are drawing better stuff, but also B, helping to thin your deck in the games that you are Wiccaning, and C, just generally being pretty large. The min roll for Malekith hits in this deck is honestly quite big. There are plenty of situations where you hit a 3-5, a 3-8, a 3-9, and your 4-drop that had 6 power is getting more than double what you actually spent on it. This is fundamentally a deck that wants to have power. And so the fact that we have these big 3-5s, Copycats, Surtur, and of course Speed is what makes this deck such a dangerous contender when it comes to using Malekith well. Now, there are also some not as good hits. Like sometimes you're gonna hit a 2-3, right? Like that's gonna happen a decent amount of the time. But face down Shadow King is actually pretty sick. And most of the time, if you're really playing the game out, your 2-3s are not going to be as big of or as high of a chance to be hit as the 3-drops are. Or at least it's going to be pretty close to even unless you're really drawing badly. So what this card does is twofold. First, it's just good on rate, so you're happy playing it both before and after Wiccan. As an example, you Wiccan on 4, you go to 7 energy on turn 5, you play a 3-drop in Malekith, and that's a lot of really good stats. That is absolutely a line that you can take. Then, of course, in the games where you aren't Wiccaning, the stats that this card can provide can help you catch up. In addition, it's providing a little bit of deck thinning. Deck thinning in the sense of you're getting your bad draws out of the way, so you can draw the cards that you really want to draw later in the game. Those cards, Alioth, Magneto, Arrow, are very important for you to have access to, and this card will help you get to them more often. On the whole, I felt like this was actually a fairly good card in this list. It is sort of pigeonholed as a mid-range card, and it has a lot of competition from, Wiccan, Anti-Venom, things like that. And it's often going to be run alongside other things like that. So what that means is that this card ends up being in a similar group as a bunch of these other cards. Because it is not necessarily accelerating you in the same way they are, it ends up falling a bit below them. So for example, I would say that it's worse than Wiccan, it's worse than Anti-Venom, but it is a thing that tends to go well with each of them. It's a great card for people who like dirtily mid-range strategies like me. I love playing a card every turn of the game. That's what I like doing. If you like playing one card every turn of the game, making sure your 4-drop has like 13 stats on it is usually pretty damn good. And if you pull a speed on it, it will do that. This is the most successful deck that I've played with Malekith, and a lot of that is due to the fact that this deck is already pretty damn good. But I do think that that speaks to the role Malekith has. He's less of a build-around and more of a supplementary tool to what a deck is already trying to do. And you'll see that as we talk about the other decks as well. For example, Malekith Ajax is a totally viable thing that you'll want to be doing, and you can see it again. This is Malekith being attached to Anti-Venom. And so because you're an Anti-Venom deck, you're a Luke Cage deck. Because you're a Luke Cage deck, you're an Afflict deck, and the deck sort of spirals outwards from there. The one major issue that this deck has, and it is a metagame issue, is that especially on day one, there are a lot of people playing this, which means there's a lot of people playing Luke Cage, and of course, there's still plenty of people playing Surtur, which means there's even more people playing Luke Cage, so you are a deck that is heavily invested in having these relevant cards come off of Malekith, like Hazmat, like US Agent, and a lot of the decks you're going to play against, or at least a lot of the decks I played against, have a card that makes all of that not matter. This is a deck that fundamentally does not want to see Luke Cage, and awkwardly, it doesn't have a lot of good solutions to that, because most of the good solutions to that are stuff you risk pulling off of a Malekith. You can try running a Rogue, you can try running a Red Guardian, I think that probably makes you better in those situations, but you still have that fundamental, oh, wait, I don't actually get this. And that is sort of the issue that this deck ran into when I played it. It has just a little bit too much reliance on your opponent not having one of the most common cards in the entire game. Next up is Malekith Ronan, which I think is in a vacuum a strictly worse version of the previous deck. It is just going to be worse, but because so many people are playing Luke Cage, and because Luke Cage is so damn good against the previous deck, I think right now this deck might actually be better. It is a metagame adaptation that's not necessarily talking about the absolute power of the deck, but more the relative power of the deck compared to what other things people are doing. Your opponent playing Luke Cage, you don't immediately lose when you're playing this. If your opponent's playing Luke Cage, you kind of do immediately lose when you're playing the Ajax one. And I just am not built for that. Like, sometimes I'm fine asking the question, but the best time to be a deck that asks the question, do you have card X, is not when that card is being played in 20 to 30% of decks. It's just not the right time to do that, in my opinion. For that reason, I think this version of the deck actually does gain some meaningful upside. There's real power here. There's real confusion here. The Supergiant plan is really interesting. Malekith helps you do stuff like pull out a Maximus so that you don't actually have to play it. The Maximus comes out, it pumps your Ronan. There's cool things happening here. There really are. I think fundamentally this deck is a little bit lower in power than a typical deck that would be played. I think, for example, it will run into trouble if it's not able to scam with a Negasonic against something like a Scar deck. However, you do have a lot of real abilities to scam with a Negasonic, who might be the most important card in the deck in terms of keeping your opponents on the same level as you. A lot of decks have more power than this deck, but those decks tend to be vulnerable to getting Negasonic Teenage Warheaded. So, for the card-by-card breakdown, we're going to be talking about the Malekith Wiccan deck. I mean, obviously, it was the best one I played, 75% win rate, all that stuff. It's also just a very good deck right now, with or without Malekith, so it's worth familiarizing yourself with, especially if you aren't already. This is one of the best decks in the game, Malekith or no, and I do think that it's worth familiarizing yourself with everything this deck can do, so let's get into the card-by-card breakdown. It is honestly remarkable to me that Quicksilver decks have ended up being as much of a thing as they have. This is a card that was totally terrible for actually ever because of what it did to your deck. However, the fact that it is the only one drop you need to play in your Wiccan deck lets you overload on 2s and 3s, and 2s and 3s are excellent to overload on because you are then able to create situations where you can play those alongside your big drops on the final turn of the game. A relevant 2 or 3 is so much more powerful than a relevant 1, even if you had a lot of those. The amount of ones you need to play to equal Quicksilver's effect most of the time ends up being in the range of 3 or 4. That's simply not worth the space right now, especially because it dilutes your ability to actually have power in the deck. The more you're investing in 1-drops, the less you're investing in stuff that really impacts the game. And that leaves you sort of empty for points a lot of the time. Your 2-drop suite is, I think, probably not all that flexible. You really just want to run 2-drops that put cards in your hand. So this is Cable here. You could also run Mirage. We have a Kate Bishop in here. Functionally, what your 2-drops are trying to do is add cards to your hand, and that means that you are going to be more easily able to curve out into your Wiccan. This is, of course, an excellent card for anyone trying to curve into Wiccan. Kate Bishop, Hawkeye is unbelievably strong. The 1-drops help you make your curve a little bit more easy when you are trying to get to that Wiccan, but also they mix in well with your 6-drops on turn 5 after you've Wiccan, because you have 7 energy, so a 6 and a 1 tends to be a common play. She's excellent in this deck. One of the best cards, in my opinion, for the value that you get for her, one of the best cards to purchase that you can find. Shadow King is, I think, a little bit required in this deck, and I do sometimes play him as Shocker, and that does sort of suck, but right now Shadow King is extremely relevant against bounce move decks, against even Scar decks, a variety of decks that this card is excellent against, and having it in your back pocket is excellent because worst case scenario, it is still a 2-3. You are fine with that. I'm moving on to talk about speed here, but I will note that the number one thing I worry about with this deck is that I have over-indexed on 3s and under-indexed on 2s. If I were to cut one of the 3s, the cut would be for Mirage. Again, because the idea is that you have a 2 that gets you something that eases your curve into Wiccan. That hasn't hurt me just yet, but I do think that if you're missing something like speed or copycat, Mirage is an excellent replacement that I don't think is actually making the deck worse and might be making the deck better. As far as speed, he's big. That's kind of it. He's a great card to pull off a Malekith, and mostly he is large. That is his thing. He is large, he is in charge, big guy, costs 3. Good news, bad news time. First, the bad news. When you pull a copycat off of a Malekith, you never drew it, so she doesn't have an ability. That's the bad news. The good news is she's still a 3/5, so you effectively played a 4/11. You're basically always happy playing a 4/11. You're not going to complain about that. So, upsides, downsides here, right? Like, this is a card that is just great on rate. It's a good card to have. I do think if I had to choose one of the 3s to cut, she would be the one to cut. But I also think that, like, maybe you can put a Red Guardian in. You can mess around with these slots a lot. I don't necessarily think any of them are 100% required, but they are sort of built to be great pulls off of Malekith, which makes him, usually if he's pulling a 3, he's like a 4/11 or bigger, and that's just a really good thing to have. Surtur is not only for Scar decks. A lot of people got on my ass for saying that he was mostly for Scar decks, and that if you didn't have Scar, you might not want to pick up Surtur. He's great here too, because he is a 3/5 that scales higher. You only have a couple of hits that actually make him go higher, but they do make him go higher. You have the ability to play Surtur and play Arrow and play Magneto, and suddenly that's a 3/11. And that's just something this deck is extremely interested in doing. Even when it's not doing that, that's a 3/5. Again, something this deck is extremely interested in doing. It gets pulled off of Malekith, still a 3/5. It's not going to get any of the procs that it would get when it is face down under Malekith, but that's still a 3/5 that you got for free. All right, so let's talk about it, right? Is playing Malekith in this deck making the deck better? I think so, but again, if you didn't want to buy Malekith, you could probably still play this deck, play Mirage or Shang-Chi, and mostly be happy about it. What Malekith adds is just beef. He's a big, beefy dude. Your minimum roll on him is a 4/9, basically. In the configuration that I have set up, if you have Mirage, it actually ends up being like a 4/8. And that's your minimum roll. Your maximum roll on him is like you get a speed, and the speed is like a 3/9, and so you played a 4/15, right? Like, there's some real beef to this guy. That's what his job is here, is just be big. Play for like 10 points on average. That's his thing, and he's pretty damn good at doing it. Especially when you think about like the final turns of these games. The other thing that he does is deck thin you so that you can get more reliably to your big guys. And that is actually one of the things that this deck tends to struggle with. If you don't have enough big guys, you don't have any real meat here. So not only is he solving the first problem by being pretty big on his own, but like you are now able to more reliably have that final turn Goliath, that final turn Magneto, that turn 5 Arrow, all the stuff you need. He makes it more likely by getting the crap out of your deck. I mean, we all know how good Wiccan is, right? Like, this has been an excellent card for basically forever, and it remains an excellent card in mid-range cores right now. I personally have been a fan of these decks for as long as they've ever existed, honestly. Wiccan feels like a card that was aimed purely at me and the decks that I like to play. These mid-range decks that, like, maybe they'll leverage an energy advantage. Maybe we'll figure it out that way. I like playing Wiccan. Obviously, a 4/7 with the upside of 2 extra energy is just unbelievably good. And it's the same sort of consideration that we have with Malekith. Like, the numbers here are good, and then the upside here is also good. The major change in this deck recently has been the inclusion of the Surtur package, and I believe that was cooked up by Chamo, who really got this deck sort of moving in this direction, which has been really good. And the Surtur package necessitates running a bunch of 10s, or at least several 10s, right? Arrow is a great 10 to have. Mostly what she's doing is being a 10, but sometimes she will scam you out a win. And a good value card, I feel like I've said this sentence in various forms like 4 times throughout the video, good on rate, sometimes way better than her rate. And that is exactly what the ethos of this mid-range type deck is doing. The floor is high, the ceiling is astronomical. I've had a sort of joke prepared for Goliath. I've been wanting to wait for an opportune time to like do a deck breakdown that had Goliath in it and then make this joke. So, I mean, I guess here goes. Here is the joke I have prepared for Goliath. I hope you laughed. Magneto, aka Magento, is an absolute stud, a beast of a 6-drop who does everything this deck wants. It is a 10+ card for your Surtur. It moves stuff around, which is hard to play around, and also, fundamentally, this guy is big. Big guy with upside means sometimes he's even better than his bigness. So far, I've been impressed with Malekith. I will say that much. I do have a full cop-out answer ready for you, though, because I know you've watched this whole video, some of you, and said, well, Cam, am I supposed to buy this card or not? And my cop-out answer is there's an OTA tomorrow, dingus. There's an OTA tomorrow. Don't buy anything right now. Are you kidding me? Just wait for the OTA and we'll figure it out then. But this is an absolutely not a card you need to be rushing to buy because OTA happens tomorrow, guys. Come on. I love when that happens because it saves me from having to give you an actual answer here. If you wanted an actual answer just outside of that, I feel like it is a good card. I don't know if it's worth the cost, especially considering, the other stuff in the cache with it. But I do feel like I've been fairly impressed with it. It's just going to be very often paired with Anti-Venom or with Wiccan, and it's going to be like the second fiddle in those decks. All right, y'all, thank you so much for checking out this video. As always, I've been KM Best. You have been phenomenal. I will see you in the next one. We're going to jump into some gameplay, and of course, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe. I will see you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed the KM Boost. For the Ajax deck, we played it already. It's fucking terrible when all your opponents play Loot Cages. There's too many people playing Loot Cage. And also, for the record, don't suggest the most common deck when I'm like, oh, we just haven't found a deck. Yeah, I played it, man. I was there when the strength of men failed. I got their Apocalypse? That's a snap, right? They do have a lot of swarms. I'm a little afraid of that. Still super lose to like 75 different swarms. Hit the swarm. Motherfucker. Hit their swarm, but not my swarm or my apocalypse? That's illegal. Or at least it should be. Jesus Lord. So this is 10. You go to like 20 over here. I think I'm losing 8 here. Ah, yes. Is she cooking? Hit me with it. We did it! Oh my god! Glad I... What card will DJ Khaled never include in any Marvel Snap deck? Glad I ate her. Oh my god. That's like such an actual terror. No, they're not. They're not dumb. They're watching the stream. Oh my god. Like, the reason we know that's a snipe is because you'd never make that play. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. The Ultra, yeah, they also are supposed to expect a Magneto here. Like, that was a super snipe. One of the most snipes ever. An unbelievable one. That was a completely fucking insane snipe. Good God. Oh, let's go. I was worried it was gonna be a hazmat. Black Panther. At least he used to be. Interesting. I see what this is going. This is going as I waste my Shadow King. And then I need it for the Black Panther. You see that? See what's happening here? I see it. Oh my god, I didn't need to. Thank god. A silver save. What are you? What are you? I am confused. think I'm supposed to snap. They look like a Luke Cagey deck. Now, we do have a lot of beef remaining. That's like might make it a little hard to win this if we don't get our beef. But our beef is good. Our beef is strong. That's some of our beef right there. Malekith gets out a card as well. So hopefully... I think it's actually impossible for us to not have either Goliath or Magneto. Whoa. Jesus. Fuck. Okay. What's our strat here, then? What? No. Oh, God. We still win! Oh, my God. That was horrifying. I will admit, I did not play around the Valentina Arnim Zola. What the fuck? 7 more things? Which is like net 5 power? No, it's -2. I don't know. I don't know. It was interesting, is the point. That arrow's nice. That arrow is nice. Big fans of that arrow. Valentina. Alright, basically the same matchup here. Hello. Double Malekith, kind of sick nasty, actually. Double Wiccan would be sick nasty if we could get to it. We'll see if we can get to it. But double Malekith makes us much more likely to double Wiccan, which is cool. Double Malekith gets speed copycat. God damn. Copycat off Malekith does have no text. That is correct. No target. Holy shit. That's crazy. Wait, I should have played around Juggernaut, right? I should have played around Juggernaut by letting Cable move to that. Yeah, now I lose, I think. Well, we'll find out. Speed's pretty big. Copycat's pretty big. Nah. Okay, we're still good. I could have played around that Juggernaut, though. I could have played around that Juggernaut, though. With the grapple into the middle. Good card that is good. And people who act like that's not true, they're the people who are wrong, not me, obviously. Yes? Alright, the Infinite. Interesting. 10 ain't bad. Can't complain. I'm gonna start complaining. Oh my god. I even get the... Oh my god. I probably have to snap that. Pokemon TCG Pocket? Okay, what the fuck? Okay, what the fuck? Doesn't happen again, though. I'm a little worried about a Magneto in the mid lane. Magneto mid would add how many points? They're at 11 right now. Magneto mid would go up to 15. This is 12. It would pull all 3. It would pull all 4. They'd lose this one. But Magneto here still wins, right? Yeah, so we still have 18 on the left. I guess we just casserole. My bad. I guess we just casserole. Like, the only play they would possibly make that stays there is Mags. I really need to draw a 2-drop. I really need to draw a 2-drop. Come on, Cable or Hawkeye. I need you right now. Well, that is usually what happens when you really need to draw a 2-drop. Our boy. Yeesh. Alright, same deck. I'm fairly tempted to speed the left here. We got their Red Guardian. That might not mean much unless they play a Luke Cage, in which case it might be meaningful. Or if they throw an Ajax in a lane on its own. Alright, that is a Luke Cage. I am fairly tempted to blow that up. We might be able to save it for later, though, because that's always their weakest thing as long as we maintain prio. Ooh, I'm kind of fascinated. Oh my god. Oh my god. Ha! We got there. Oh, that was super close. Bunch of different possibilities there. Wong. I see. I'm going to give them a Quicksilver. This seems sick. Ow. Do I play this now, and do I put it on the Baxter, is my question, I feel like. Yup.